In the previous Step 5 videos, we looked at specific circumstances that could impact revenue recognition. Things like customer acceptance clauses, consignments, repurchase provisions, bill and hold arrangements, and we talked about what the specific requirements are and when they could impact revenue recognition. We also talked about licenses. Licenses have some very specific rules under 606 as well as IFRS 15. We talked about standalone functionality, say software for example, and we talked about symbolic licenses, and then which of those is symbolic will be recognized over time. Standalone functionality, like software, will be recognized at a point in time. We're now going to move to the core of the standard, which focuses on 3 criteria, and if any of these criteria are met, then the performance obligation will be recognized over time. If none of those 3 criteria are met, then the performance obligation will be satisfied at a point in time. What you see on your screen is the software that we created to help companies understand and implement the requirements of the standard. This is located at tasglobal.co, and I will be using this to help to communicate what the requirements are. So you see the first question asks, is this performance obligation a license of intellectual property? The example would imply that it is, but for purposes of this demonstration, let's just say no. So let's say this is not a license of intellectual property. Now we move into what the requirements are of the standard for recognizing over time. So we're being asked, does a customer simultaneously receive and consume the benefit of this performance obligation? A good example there might be a daily cleaning service where a company comes each day to your office and provides cleaning. So when they do so, you're simultaneously receiving that benefit and you're consuming that benefit. So if you answer yes, remember there's 3 criteria for overtime recognition. Any one of those 3, if met, would mean that you will recognize over time. And this is the first of the 3 criteria. So if we indicate yes, then that tells us automatically the performance obligation will be recognized over time. And the next question that pops up is it's asking if the outputs would provide the most faithful depiction of progress towards satisfying performance obligation. And if you answer yes, then you're going to be asked to select which outputs provides the most faithful measurement, so units produced, units delivered, etc. If you'd answered no, then you're saying that inputs provide the most faithful measurement of progress, so now you're going to be asked which inputs provide the most faithful, machine hours, labor hours, etc. But let's say we had answered no there, which meant that the customer is not simultaneously receiving and consuming the benefits of the performance obligation. So the next question, which is the second of the 3 criteria for overtime recognition, the second question is, does the work performed create or enhance an asset that the customer controls? So if the work being performed is creating or enhancing an asset that the customer controls, then that means you would be recognized over time. The performance obligation would be recognized over time. You might have a highly sophisticated piece of equipment, a satellite or something to that effect, that the customer actually owns, and you're being engaged to perform specific services on that highly customized piece of equipment. In that case, you're creating or enhancing an asset that the customer controls. So similar to what we said above, if you answer yes to that, you're once again asked, okay, you've determined and concluded that this performance obligation is going to be satisfied over time. So you're now being asked, okay, is the measurement of progress either outputs method, machine, labor hours, etc., or if you had answered no, or excuse me, yes means outputs, so units produced, units delivered, or if you had answered no, then it would be an input, so machine hours, labor hours, etc. But let's say no, which takes us to the third and the final criteria to determine if the performance obligation will be recognized over time. The question is, does the work create an asset that has no alternative use, and does that entity have the enforceable right to payment, and that includes profit, for work completed to date? So if you have developed an asset and you can't redirect it to be sold to another customer, there's nothing that you can do with what has been created other than sell it to that one customer. And if the contractual terms mean that you're entitled to consideration, including profit, throughout the duration of the arrangement, then you would meet this criteria, you would answer yes, and then you would be directed to the same questions we had before. Something that you would need to give consideration to, because again, you have to be entitled to consideration, including profit, throughout the entire duration of the contract. So termination provisions and what consideration you would receive upon termination can impact whether this criteria is met.